back to another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Friday, July 8th, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at the latest 2022 538 Senate forecast and take a look at what they're predicting for the US Senate and my opinions on the data they have showing, and discuss a little more about how the 2022 midterms might end up looking like. But before we do begin, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and to turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So now, without further ado, let's get started with the video. So, the 2022 midterms are really shaping up to be a very interesting election year in that there's a lot of different factors. You have the economy and general environment of the election trending one way, but you also do have certain other aspects that are going to make this election interesting. For example, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which I'm going to get into a lot of the very specifics maybe later on in this video or later on in a later video. But I think that these different aspects have really shifted where this midterm is. So as we go through the data, I'm going to give you guys what I think and what are really some of the factors. So when we look at the basic Senate makeup, right now they have it a 54% chance to 46% chance of winning. So with the Republicans, of course, ahead. I think that when you look at the current possibilities, I think that, when you look at the Senate election, how it's progressed over time, with different nominations, with different things going on, a lot of the races that I think the Republicans could have won in a more easier manner have shifted in certain ways. I think there's still a very good chance for the Republicans to win in some of these races due to the national environment. And I mean, considering the fact that right now, it's not the best situation to be a Democrat, nationwide. The economy is in disarray, inflation through the roof, and general morale with the Biden administration is not that good. And I think it's something that this data shows. I think that based on where the map is, these results are not as much of a indicator of where the country is, because I think in certain states, which we're going to get into, a lot of these races have, shaped up to be not so much because of national issues, but state issues and candidates themselves. So when we look at this map and we see all the different Senate races, we kind of see some general trends I think I would like to point out. So you, of course, have states that have been trending towards one party or another. I think the Republicans have more of these. You see places like Ohio, where J.D. Vance has an astronomically higher chance of winning that if this was a race in the past. There's states like Florida, maybe like Iowa even, where Chuck Grassley's been there for years. But a lot of these states that were swing states, they were competitive states. They're starting to go more and more solidly for the Republican Party, and I think that is a general trend we've seen over the last 2 years. Some states have gotten more and more Republican, at the hands of COVID-19, at the hands of some things. I think the most notable example is here in Florida, where we see Marco Rubio with astronomically high chances of winning without facing a real challenge against someone like Val Demings. And that is something that's going to help the Republicans hold on to some of the seats they have. If this was any other election year where the national morale wasn't where it was tonight, or in this election year, where the Democrats had maybe a little bit more competitiveness. If you put this map perhaps in a 2018 scenario, you see, I think this map could be way far worse for the Republican Party. But that's something that's really helped them, because these seats that in a traditional election year could have been perhaps maybe lean or toss up, in this election year, they move further to the right. Now, when we talk a little bit more about the actual toss up seats, I think that these are seats that, again, some of them should be more towards the Republican if you're talking about traditional election year, but for a variety of reasons, there's not. And again, some of these states, they're shifting and getting closer, again, for the same reason we've discussed of the national morale. I think, for example, places like Nevada, where you see Cortez Masto and Laxalt, these are races that, traditionally have been very close. I mean, you've seen Senate races here in the last years under 5 points. So But again, the national environment is something that's going to be interesting. As of right now, it's a tied race, and you see those same trends. You can see those kind of same trends up in Pennsylvania with Oz and Fetterman. Although there's been a lot of conflicting polls saying that Fetterman is ahead by a considerably larger margin from what is shown here. Places like Arizona, where you see pretty much Blake Masters slightly behind Mark Kelly. Um, and in different races, you see races that are starting to get a little bit close. I think it's not to the point where, Democrats should be worried with places like West Washington and places like New Hampshire. There's a lot of these races that could get a little bit close, but what is the general trend that we're seeing in a lot of these races in places like Arizona and places like Georgia? We're seeing that the new form of the Republican Party is pretty much on the ballot. Whereas, a lot of the things that happened with the last days of the Trump administration that really threw off a lot of suburban voters, such as, the January 6th and that whole debacle, which a lot of it, you have to remember, is based on what the lens and what the optics are on that. And the optics on that were the Republicans had a very, very, a very bad attitude to that. And that turned off a lot of suburban voters, I think most notably in Georgia and Arizona. But now what's really on the ballot is when you start talking about the economic reforms and the economics and all the actions that the Biden administration has, or in some cases you could call it a lack of action. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of these closed Senate races that are going to be by less than a couple of points. It's going to be based on those issues. And as of right now, in some of these races, they've benefited from semi-bad candidate choice. If you look at the Democrats in Georgia, Raphael Warnock is somewhat of a better candidate for the state than someone like Herschel Walker. I mean, Herschel Walker has had a couple scandals here and there. There's still a big possibility for Herschel Walker to win, but there's other alternate routes with where their Republicans could have taken that could have brought them to easier victory in these states. As for the Democrats, their issues right now are not so much like the Republicans, where you see them face issues with candidate choice. But I think the Democrats' biggest issue is they have a lack of messaging. I think that other than Roe versus Wade and the abortion issue, the Democrats are lacking a message of unity. And, that message in 2020 was, well, we're all united against Trump. And in the past with Hillary Clinton, it was a little different. It took more of a policy perspective. Now, today the Democrats don't have that message. And I think it's something that's going to end up costing them. And I'm going to get more into individual Senate races and what I think and who I think is going to prevail in my Senate prediction that should be coming out very soon, probably tomorrow. But I think it's kind of a general trend that we're seeing. And right now, if you look at the map, it's really a 50-50 split. And with that, the Democrats have the majority because we have to remember that Kamala Harris is the vice president, and in case of a 50-50 tie, the vice president comes in and breaks all tiebreaker votes. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, a 50-50 majority is not really a Senate majority for the Democrats because you're always going to have your rogue votes of people like Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. But that's beside the point. So I think it's a very interesting graph that we have right here, kind of showing the bell curve of the possibilities. So if you see the bell curve, it kind of skews slightly to the right, and they expect that in most situations, the Republicans to be the victors in these races. Now, again, it's going to end up being a very, very tight race. Pretty much what we do know for a fact is that there's going to be a very small difference in the majority. It's clearly not going to be one of those years where we're going to see super majority for either party because the chances of that happening right now with the Senates that we have right now, the races that we have now, are very unlikely. And I think that could be told here by this 80%. 54 seats at the max for the Republicans, 53 for the Democrats. I think ultimately we're going to be falling down somewhere between 51, maybe 52 seats for the Republicans. And looking at the possibilities and chances of control, you've seen that those chances have certainly dropped for the Republican Party. I think that they were certainly at a better position a couple of weeks ago before the Roe versus Wade ruling. I think that in the grand scheme of things, Roe versus Wade didn't change much. It might change some races by a couple of points. But again, in tight races, it might make a difference. Although, I think at the end of the day, while there are some people that, um, we have to remember that the Roe versus Wade issue, which I want to make a video about this because I think it's something that's very important to discuss about the actual impacts politically about the issue. There is definitely voters who vote solely on Roe versus Wade, but it's one of those issues where a lot of people that did, they voted it because they were pro life. So at the end of the day, that didn't really impact their vote. But the people that were pro choice, um, there's certainly going to be a lot of people that vote solely on Roe versus Wade, and but I think it's not going to be to the level where it's such a big thing and it's going to be a lot of people's main issue. I think that issues like abortion and issues of things that are, not economics in a year, those are issues that take center stage in an election when economics are generally good. And because economics are not generally good right now, it's going to be tough for people to say put that in their first priority. So that's kind of why we saw kind of the immediate reaction to the Roe versus Wade overturning, and then to kind of where we are today. So I think it's something that's very interesting. And finally, we have a whole list of who's ahead in each race. In Nevada, you have Cortez Masto slightly ahead. In Pennsylvania, Fetterman's slightly ahead. In Georgia, surprisingly, Walker ahead. And you see a lot of these trends in the races that are closest, in the races that are ultimately going to matter when it comes to deciding the balance of power for the United States Senate. We end up seeing that, it's going to be a little bit tough. And we have to remember, the Republicans, to gain control of the U.S. Senate, will need a +1 seat net margin. So, again, that's not accounting for any seats they lose. Let's suppose they lose Pennsylvania. That means they're going to have to win 2. So on and so forth. And right now, it's looking like it's going to be a very close race. We might not even see a move in the balance of power at all. We might see a net zero gain for the parties that say 1 and 1. But I'm going to get more specifically what I think about each of these races coming up very soon. Because I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, when it comes to Senate races, it's hard to categorize them as a whole national thing because it comes down to the individual candidates in each state. And I think each different race has a lot of different factors that are important to analyze. So that is kind of your overview of the 538 forecast. I think that overall, they're pretty fair right now with what I think could happen. I think the Senate races are going to end up being pretty close to the balance of power. And, looking forward towards the midterm elections, I think it's an example of what the midterms are to come. At least in the Senate, maybe possibly in some governor's mansions. But I think all that deserves its own video. So, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know I haven't posted in quite a while. It's been a couple of months. I've been very busy with school. I had national competition for Future Business Leaders of America, which actually I went 3rd place in the nation, so that was very interesting. But now that midterm season is here, with a lot of primaries in place, I'm really excited to get back and bring you guys the best political content so you guys can get an idea of what's going on across the nation. So guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you so much, and goodbye.